Hello, everyone. Well, we just finished studying the book of Revelation, and I've had a number of emails and questions from you guys. And one of the questions that comes up when I teach the book of Revelation is, why does God allow evil and suffering? And I think this is important because we have to answer that as Christians. We have to answer that question. And uh, and see what the Bible has to say about it, but also philosophically what is said about it. And so, first of all, I want to talk about God's transcendence and God's veracity. Now, by transcendence, we mean God. It means that God is outside of time and space. Okay, He's eternal, and He's unable to be changed by the forces of the universe because he put them in place. Okay, so he's outside of space and time. That's the big deal about this. The veracity means that God is truth telling. Um, Titus, in the book of Titus, chapter 1, verse 2, it says, God who does not lie. And there's several places in the Bible we see this. So God does not lie. And he can't lie. What he says is. And it's not that he wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to say truth today. He wakes up in the morning and whatever he says is truth. And so that's a couple things about God. So then we have to ask the question, and that is, why does God allow evil and suffering? And there's a problem with evil. Okay, Augustine defined evil not as a thing in and of itself, but as a parasite on good. And so evil is like the lack of good, something that is lacking. It's not a thing in itself, and he considered evil to be that which is missing, and it's a little bit hard. So especially for my cop friends, they'll understand this. I want to maybe get you to understand this. This is a donut. Now we understand the donut. What we see, though, that helps us to understand evil is the good part of the donut. The evil is the whole. It's what it's lacking. Okay. Now I think to understand a little bit more about evil, we have to understand the history of evil and two key events of evil. The first one is the fall of Satan, and let's look at Ezekiel 28. And that's about in the middle of the Old Testament. It's verse 11, Ezekiel 28:11. It says this: The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, take up a lament concerning the king of Tyre, and say to him, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Now, he starts out with the king of Tyre, but obviously he's not talking about him. He's talking about Satan, and he says, you were the model of perfection, full of wisdom, and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden. You were in the Garden of Eden, the Garden of God. Every precious stone adorned you: ruby, topaz, emerald, chrysolite, onyx, jasper, sapphire, turquoise, and beryl. Your settings and mountings were made of gold. On the day you were created, they were prepared. You were anointed as a guardian cherub. You're an angel. Okay? For I so ordained you. You were on the holy mount of God. You walked among the fiery stones. You had a special place with God. You were blameless in the ways from the day you were created. Watch, till wickedness was found in you. Through your widespread trade, you were filled with violence and you sinned. And it's a sin within the spiritual world. And so that's what happened. And how did that happen? We find that out in Isaiah chapter 14. And it says, how have you fallen from heaven, O morning star, son of the dawn? You've been cast down to earth, and Jesus even tells us about it, that he saw this happen. You once who laid low the nations, you said in your heart, and here's what got Satan into trouble, okay? I will ascend into heaven. I'll go where I want to go. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will be above God. That's making myself God. I will sit enthroned on the mount of assembly on the uttermost heights of the sacred mountain. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. So Satan says this, and he brings evil into at least the spiritual world. And I think because the idea, what Satan was upset about was mankind. Mankind being made in the image of God upset Satan because it didn't take long for him to figure out he wasn't going to be that high up if mankind was made, because mankind being made in the image. Now, we see the fall of man in Genesis chapter 3, and, that's where the serpent tells Eve, hey, you won't get in trouble. Go ahead and eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And it's funny, she has to be tricked. She takes and eats from it, and she gives it to that Gomer Pyle husband of hers, Adam, and he just takes and eats it. So evil comes into the physical world as you and I know it, okay? Now, we have to ask the question with this, does evil argue against the existence of God? And what do I mean by that? Well, look how it logically falls. God is all powerful, so God can eliminate evil. God is all loving and merciful, and by his power and love, he would eliminate evil. Got me? Evil exists. And that's the problem, God. If you're so powerful, if you're so merciful, if you're so loving, then you wouldn't let these things happen like we saw in the book of Revelation, where possibly 4 billion people are killed in the earth. We see the evil that's taking place in our society now. So God, if you're so powerful, if you're so loving, you would eliminate evil. Yet evil exists. And so we have to ask the question, and even go further. If God is not all powerful, or if God doesn't have mercy, or if God is cruel, okay, then maybe God does not exist. Maybe we're wrong, and he doesn't exist. Did God create evil? You know, 1 John 1:5 says, the message we have heard from him and declare to you, God is light, in him there is no darkness at all. So God didn't do that. The problem, I think, sometimes is in the question. It's in the question. And we have to ask ourselves this question. I want to go back and I want to ask ourselves this question. The question is, why does God allow evil and suffering? Why does God allow evil? Is God all powerful? Is God all loving? And we've heard this before, and we stumble over the answers. And why do bad things happen to good people? Let's take Paul, for instance, the Apostle Paul. You might have heard of him. He was close to God. He was tight with God. He was God's place, God's time, and all that, and he had it all. But look at this. Paul had the time after he becomes a Christian. Paul goes to prison, flogged at least 5 times, beaten with rods 3 times, once stoned, 3 times shipwrecked, spent a night and a day in the sea, exposed to death, constantly on the move, in danger of rivers, bandits, countrymen, his own countrymen, Gentiles, in the danger of the city and the country, danger from false brothers, been hungry and thirsty. And he was God's good guy. Why does God allow evil? And here's the problem again. If God is all-powerful, omnipotent, he would have the power to eliminate evil. If God is all-loving, by his love he would eliminate evil and suffering. But evil exists, doesn't it? So either God is not all-powerful, God is cruel, or God does not exist. So what could be the answer? What is the answer? Here's what it is, guys. God, remember we said God was outside of time? So look at God up there, okay? And below the thick black line that you see below is the time continuum. And in this time continuum, that's what you and I live in. And God is above, let's say God's above the parade, okay? So what happens is that when evil comes into man's world, okay, God sees it. And then God goes 4,000 years to the cross, let's say, and there the cross, Jesus Christ pays for that sin. And then God has a time where he's going to put an end to evil. Here's the point. God is always in the immediate. Notice how the lines go back to God's in the immediate, and the yellow circle shows that. Because God's outside of time. God looks down on the parade. He sees the beginning of the parade. He sees the end of the parade. You and I march in the parade. All we see is the corner of the streets as they come up and the stores on the side as they come up. God doesn't. God sees the beginning of the parade, the end of the parade. God takes immediate action and continuous action against evil. So when we ask the question, why does God allow evil and suffering? It's a bad question. God never allowed evil and suffering because he took immediate action against it. Now you ask the question, and this is interesting, why didn't God, when evil came into play, why didn't God take care of it right then? Well, because God would take care of Adam and Eve right then. He would wipe them out. And then you and I don't exist. The thing that God loved, the thing made in his image, would not exist. And so God says, you'll be in a time continuum. And as the time continuum goes, I will take action. And as God puts things into the time continuum, we call that miracles. But he's always going to handle this and always going to handle evil. He never gets off. And eventually God will put an end to the evil when Christ comes back and this type of thing happens. Now, this is, God has never allowed evil, never has, never will. Took immediate, continuous action against it. So here's the thing. When it comes to evil, when it comes to anything, do you and I have free will? We have free will. And he told Adam and Eve in the garden, it's real simple. Don't eat from that tree. It says it in the New Testament. He says, if you love me, keep my commandments. You see, I can tell God how many times I love him. But the truth's in the action. And most of us, if you're like me, you haven't been that good at it. But he says, if you love me, keep my commandments. And the only way that I can keep his commandments to show that I love him is to have free will. So I have free will to do right and wrong. Evil exists. and I have to deal with it. And so when I look at this thing, I say, okay, I can understand that evil exists. But what proof do we have that it's really God controlling it, that what you've said is true, Dale? The truth is in the resurrection. If the resurrection of Jesus Christ is true, then it's all true. If none of that's true, none of it's true. Now I want to appeal to my cop friends out there who ask these questions. If it's true, okay, then it's all true. Well, I counted within the New Testament, and there's over 516 eyewitnesses. Now, 516 eyewitnesses to the resurrection, not 516 people who saw Jesus while he was alive. There's many more than that. But to the resurrection, there's 516 people that saw the resurrection. And Paul, the Apostle Paul, says, look, go talk to these people. It happened. It was real. Now, with my cop friends, you guys know how to investigate. I would say take this and investigate the resurrection. If the resurrection's true, the resurrection of Jesus Christ, if it's true, it's all true. And you really need to pay attention to that. If it's not true, go your merry way. Now, there's a couple of, I want you to look in the New Testament, and if you have questions about where these parts are talking about the New Testament, get a hold of me, dalesharp76@gmail.com. In fact, any questions you have, feel free to send them to me, and I'll answer them for you, and I'll show you where to go. The answer to this whole thing is God never allows evil and suffering. It's a bad question. He took immediate action. Now, there's a couple of books that you could get to begin your investigation, and that is The Case for the Resurrection by Habermas and Licona, which is a good book, and also Cold Case Christianity, which was written by J. Warner Wallace, who's a cop. And so these are good books, and there's several books, and there's several. Go on the internet and go on YouTube. And there's several people talking about it, and you'll pick up even more than I gave you here. But I just wanted to take this time, since we've gone through the book of Revelation, and so many things are evil within the book, and the wrath that comes upon the earth, both from Satan and from God, and what happens on the earth. So take a look at these books, and you can figure out, God is doing this in the book of Revelation to put an end to this problem of evil. And that's really what we want to do. But God has never allowed it. He's always taken action against it. Hey guys, thank you so much for being with us in the book of Revelation. I think it was about 17 lessons in it. It was, I know I had over 250 pages of notes, over 130 slides, and so it's just it's just the work that we love to do. And thank you all, the many of you that have been listening and watching. We thank you so much.